Okay, let's have some fun. We're on. Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to India Game Changer. Today we are joined by Murugan Manoj Kumar, the founder and CEO at Rodo. I think I got all that right, actually. I think I'm just going to go with Manoj. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Michael. Thank you. And thanks a lot for having me on the show.
It's my pleasure. I'm curious if it's normal for you on a Saturday afternoon to be podcasting.
As an entrepreneur, I think, yes, Saturdays are a working day. And for me, most often than not, I end up working on a Sunday also. That's how it drives.
We were joking before we started recording, right? I was like, I don't know, because you asked me what time it was where I reside, and I was like, oh, it's only 5 o'clock, right? So it's not that different than it is in India. And I said to you, kind of half jokingly, but not really, like, I kind of don't know what day it is, and I rarely know what time it is. And you made that face like, really? And now you're saying it's kind of the same way, right? Like, do you care if it's Saturday or Wednesday? It doesn't really matter, does it?
Absolutely not. Only time when it matters is, on a Sunday, you can't ring up your customer and ask him for a sales call.
Yeah, but that's the only difference, right? I find it really funny. Today, some of my corporate friends still will say to me, like on a Thursday or a Friday, have a great weekend. I don't know what to say in response. And not even ironically, I'm just not really sure what to say. Anyway,
Right.
before we get into kind of the more central part of this conversation, can we get some of your background for some context?
Absolutely. If I have to introduce myself in a non-textbook way, I would say I'm an engineer by qualification, but more so, I see myself as a problem solver, right? Like that's how I would like to identify myself. But otherwise, I am a normal, guy brought up in a middle class family from Bangalore, right? Born and brought up in Bangalore, south of India. Did my schooling here and then went on to pursue my undergraduation in mechanical engineering from one of these premier institutes in the country, NIT Surathkal, right? And then got my tenure of working in an MNC manufacturing company and then started up Rodo in 2017. So that's a brief of, my past, like how I ended up at Rodo.
Can you
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about what it's like to grow up in and around Bangalore? Do you know what I mean? Because from the outside, it feels like it's this really dynamic tech center. It has to seep into your everyday life when you're a kid, no?
Absolutely. I think it's a good question. I've not been asked this before, but it's pretty evident. Like growing up, I've seen Bangalore, which was like a silent, pretty good city. It used to be called a garden city, right, for a very long time before it got its identification as Silicon City of India, right? So I've kind of seen during my childhood how all this IT boom kind of really changed the scene here. The city just expanded beyond what we considered as Bangalore, right? Back in the day, 10 minutes from your house used to be outskirts of the city, and now, you can be on the road for an hour and still be inside Bangalore.
And is there a real tech vibe there? Like, is it almost like it is in Silicon Valley, where in the cafes in Bangalore, everyone's talking about startups or technology or some new thing that's happening?
Oh, yeah, no doubt about that. Absolutely. And I can be doubly sure of it because during my tenure working with an MNC as a freshman graduate,
Right.
fresher graduate, I was in cities like Chandigarh and later on in Goa, right? So the kind of vibe I've seen there, especially as far as startup ecosystem is considered, and then back in Bangalore, almost every day or every single weekend there's some co-founder meetup, startup meetup, and all of this happening. And if you're in a cafe anywhere in Bangalore, more often than not you'll be seeing somebody pitching to an investor or a mentor or having a chat with a potential co-founder. So it's very much there, and there are a few centers, like hubs within Bangalore, where you'll find a lot more cafes with freelancers and co-founders and stuff hustling all around.
In a way, does it inspire, you think, people like you and other entrepreneurs to just like, I won't want to say work harder because it's like you're not working hard otherwise, but like to inspire you to do bigger things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, as in, yes, I think I don't have to look very far away. Luckily and fortunately, I just look beside me, right? I have co-founders, I have my team and stuff. These guys inspire me day in, day out.
Yeah.
right? So it's just like that, right? And there are so many other people I have seen, and I've been in awe as in how can they do something like this, right? And this is just like any other day for them. But for me, I was in awe and many times, right? And all these co-founders or all these startup meetups that I used to attend in 2017 when we started, right? We were meeting quite a lot of people from diverse background. People had come down to Bangalore only to start up, in such situations were very common, right? And looking at those guys, it was only about charging us up with more energy
Yeah,
and getting inspired.
that's what I think. I want to come to Bangalore and see what it's really like there. I really do.
Oh yeah,
To be fair, I'd love to have a recording studio there so I could just like constantly be part of that conversation. Anyway, can you talk to
amazing.
me about
And
how you got into the logistics business? And I'm curious like what the entry was, but also once you enter, like what is the status of it in India?
see, for me, I think I've been very closely, at least, introduced to, or I've been around logistics as a function for a very long time, because my family is in manufacturing or used to be in manufacturing business. So logistics was very natural
Yeah.
for me to be introduced to, right? And maybe that's where I picked it up, in terms of being curious to understand what really happens, right? Transportation is where things start up, and one led to the other. One of my projects in college, when I was doing engineering, was automated truck loading system. That's how fascinated I am with these big machines, and that's how logistics was introduced to me. It was very complicated, and that's what interested me the most. And then when I got into the industry, right, especially working in a manufacturing company,
Yeah.
I was a kid in the candy shop, learning quite a lot, and logistics was something that caught my eyes, right? Because in a time, especially 2016, 2017, the time when e-commerce was like, it was a poster child for innovations around here, like Flipkart or Amazon and all of
Yep.
these things. And I was getting, my orders, e-commerce order delivered in Goa, in a tier two town in Goa, and I had absolute visibility and all of that, right? That experience was brilliant. And I expected the same thing with Ola or all the other companies that I had access to being in Bangalore, right? When I was seeing my counterparts in industries asking very rudimentary questions of where's my truck, I was like, wait, aren't we a multi-billion dollar company? Right? I thought there's a lot of tech, and there indeed was a lot of tech internally. But logistics was one thing that seemed, people did not have answers to in a way that you would expect them to, right? Because a lot of my friends who went to US, they were working or they were doing MS and so on. They were talking about optimization. They were talking about, ML and AI. And here I saw my colleagues asking very rudimentary questions. And that's, the curiosity which got me into thinking about how can we possibly solve for it.
In India, are there big logistics players like DHL, like Federal Express in the United States? Or is it really fragmented, or is it some kind of combination of both between sort of like the tier one cities and the tier two, tier three cities? Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And like, who is this tech being built for that you're working with?
Right. So, a good question. In fact, yes, there are a lot of course, India is like a focus area for a lot of people. So the DHLs of the world, there are quite a lot of them in India as
Yep.
well. But the service area, or, if, 100% of the market is considered, most of these either cater to about 5, 10% or 15% of the market,
Got it.
right? The rest of them are traditional businesses that existed for a long time, right? I look at logistics service today in two layers. One is your physical layer of your network, your connections, your operations ability. And the second layer is a digital layer, right? And that's one layer that most of these other people do not have. So that's what Rudo is also trying to do. How do we democratize technology, or how do we put technology in these guys' hand in such a way that we create a level playing ground that way? DHL kind of a tech with all transporters is just about equipping them. That's the kind of thing that we're doing at Rudo.
Yeah. So if you're going into a second tier city and you're taking a local or hyper local provider of logistics services and they use Roto, what are they getting and what's changing for them? Right. And how do you how do you make sure before, because, obviously your family was in the manufacturing business, so you had to deliver the things you were manufacturing by definition. This is
Right.
logistics. But how do you keep knowing like what these logistics providers need if you're not in their business every single day?
Right. So I think I'm not sure what's a good answer for it, but I'll tell you what we do for this, right? Staying very relevant and staying very close to the kind of customers or users that you're solving for, I believe is important. As a process at Rodo, we tend to have this formal calls with our customers to try and understand, to get feedback. But apart from that, me personally as a founder, I have something called as a customer advisory board, where it's informal relationships that I maintain with people who are our customers and target customers,
Right.
where I tend to discuss more than just Rodo, right? Where I get to learn more about their business. And these conversations are human in nature, right? Where beyond business, beyond just enabling them, it gets a lot of information being shared, which helps us also understand what's the challenge that we need to be solving for, etc.
And what are they? In other words, when you stand back and look at it and think, okay, we need to use a specific type of technology to fix this problem and to also scale this problem so it doesn't just work for this person, but for everybody. What are these problems that you're trying to solve?
Right. So let me put it this way, right? What are the problems we're trying to solve for? Rather, what are we looking to achieve through this, right?
Yeah.
Because most of what we build is purpose driven, right? In the sense, there's a very famous saying that I think Henry Ford had once said, right? Had you asked your customer what do you want, they would have told, I want faster horses,
It's so
right?
funny. You are probably the fifth or sixth person that said this to me in the last few days. And it's not because, and I haven't heard it in years. So something, no, something's happening. Like people are thinking about this for some reason. And like, as you started saying, you saw me smiling, right? Because I'm
Right.
like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I have heard this just this week so many times. But prior to that, almost never. I'm just trying to figure out why. But you're right. Obviously, right? If I asked my customers what they wanted, they would just say faster horses, which is, and they didn't really want that at all. But yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead. I'm not suggesting that you go and ask the customers because they won't even know like what they want in this particular case, maybe. But when you
Hmm.
look at it after your conversations, you're thinking, oh, if we put tech here, that's going to be better. What is that?
Absolutely. So over here, if you look at the general problem that we're talking about in manufacturing, I have to give you an example, right?
Go
When
for
we
it.
were there in manufacturing supply chains, and I was having a chat with one of these guys on a forum who sits out of a different country, Australia, right? And they were procuring material, right? Internationally, there was a tender and stuff, and there was one of these Indian companies, and there was a company based out of another country, right? China or another country. And clearly, India, the product that was being sold, like the actual value that was quoted was much lesser than the other company. Something that in a normal situation people would definitely choose the Indian good.
Got it.
But he was like, I think we are going with the other guy. And I was perplexed. I was really intrigued to understand why was this decision being made.
Right.
And he said, see, beyond your product cost, there are two things that are very important for me, right? The Indian company was unable to give him an answer on when is it going to reach him, right? And B, the cost of logistics was much, much higher than what was quoted by the other person because he was supposed to bear the cost of logistics.
Right.
So one thing that really made me understand at that point in time was logistics was a very important element in businesses,
Yeah.
right? And empowering these guys is going to be important, and that's what Rodo is solving for these guys. There are so many small processes in everyday logistics operations that needs to be digitized. Just because of digitization, there's a lot of efficiencies that can be driven at scale and at a smaller scale, but more importantly, the connectedness that we can bring by digitizing our key stakeholders and logistics has a bigger picture in terms of realizing value, not just for himself, but the entire ecosystem around him. Yeah. So what we are today doing is largely digitizing these stakeholders and logistics,
Yep.
which helps them get a digital footprint and also solve for key processes that they're internally having, right, which are more manual in nature.
Yeah, and
Right.
again, at some level, I guess if it's very fragmented, a lot of that does have to be one-off, but then it can likely be rolled out to some of your other clients, I would presume. Did you grow, if your family was in manufacturing, did you grow up in a house where like mom and dad were talking about the business so that it was just kind of like by osmosis, you were listening to these conversations about how to run businesses? Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah. In fact, I was in a joint family. Add up to it, it was not just my dad, but my granddad or uncle. Uh, you know, I come from a community of people talking business,
Yeah.
right? And interestingly, since you brought it up, one snippet that I remember from about 3 years back. We were a bootstrap company, right? For a very long time, we built Rodo as a bootstrap company. So during one of these conversations with those startup meetings that I was talking about,
Right.
so one fine gentleman, asked me like, "What's the revenue you're making, etc." I'm like, "We are making X Y Z, and we are growing at like 30% month on month." And he was just shocked, and he was like, "And we broke even operationally in 4 months of our launch,
Wow.
being bootstrapped." And he was like, "How can you do that being bootstrapped?" So for me, I didn't feel so surprised, because I come from a family and a community with they've been doing this for ages, right? Being bootstrapped and being profitable and growing. So that's the kind of place I come from.
Do you think it's businesses like yours that over time have a higher possibility of succeeding because of the way you're building a business to scale based on getting more paying customers and solving the problems for customers as opposed to just growing for growth's sake and then raising money off that growth? Do you know what I mean? Like, don't you think you have a higher chance of success if your first customer is a paying customer? And then every customer asking that, you're not willing to give them a free or a freemium service because you already have a paying client. And you're like, well, that dude's paying, so you have to pay. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's an interesting time you asked this question, especially in terms of the investment climate that's out
Go
there.
ahead. But you know what I mean,
Right.
right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I come from the school of thought wherein, I've all even in the domain that you see that we've chosen is B2B,
Yep.
right? So I believe in solving for these real problems that exist.
Yep.
And if a problem is real, I think, people should value it by giving their time, money, or effort of doing something behind it. So I definitely believe that, paying customers and growing with paying customers is a very healthy way of building a sustainable business out there.
Yeah, I think so too. And look, I think that in reverse, if you're building a business just to raise the next round, you're just in the wrong business. No? Is that fair?
Yes, yes. So that's one thing that, the reason why we continue to be bootstrapped for quite a long time, because as a founder, I also invest in private markets, right? Like on stock exchange and stuff. So I see myself in the shoes of an investor when they're looking at Rodo's deck, right? Would I invest in Rodo? Should I be in the shoes of the investor,
Right.
right? Do I see the value that I'm trying to project? So I completely am in the same state of mind, right? It needs to make sense because you're bringing somebody else to add value to your business. So it needs to be a two-way thing. It's a business at the end of the day.
It is a business at the end of the day. Have you raised money?
Yes, yes, we have raised from good set of investors.
A good set of So this is the other thing I wanted to know. What is the importance? Because you said it, right?
Yeah.
And we've been talking a lot about like the right way to build a company, where venture money is interesting, where it adds value. What do
Yes.
you think the significance is of having great investors? Because money's a commodity, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll tell you two things where investors beyond money really add value, and I think I'll have to thank my advisors also on the same, because it takes a lot to find the right set of people who have the same mindset as you,
Yeah.
right? So even when we were finding our first set of angel investors, like me and my mentor, Mr. Panapa, were very clear that we don't need money or just people with money.
Right.
That's not going to help Rodo in the long run. So I truly believe that investors beyond money bring is they're they've been there and done that, right? Most of our investors are angels, or the VC who is funded at Rodo used to run a business themselves. So they've been there and done that. And to empathize with the founder and the company and its path to growth, they need to understand what are the difficulties that goes behind it. And if they have navigated through that in their own journey,
Yeah.
they're more likely to give you relevant advice rather than hearsay. So that's one very important thing that I believe learning off their experience helps us evade a few obvious pitfalls. The second thing is good investors also come with network. I would be very happy to say that there are a lot of good companies and customers that we've been introduced by our investors. And and domain knowledge is also very important, right? For us, we are building B2B, especially in logistics. So if you see, a lot of our investors would have some part or some kind of interference with logistics or manufacturing as an industry.
Yeah.
So it helps quite a lot. So these are 2 3 things that I believe investor beyond money makes a lot of difference to a company.
When you think about an investor's network, what are the benefits to you of that as well? Again, besides raising the next round, right? What is the likelihood that somebody inside a great investor network is then going to lead you to more clients?
Yes. Being able to get access to more clients, especially in B2B, it really really helps. I'll give you an example, right?
Please.
Because especially at the stage at which we raised fund and we are raising fund, of course the vision that we have for Rodo is much bigger than where we stand today, and we are growing by the day. So that means contextually we learn things that are necessary for us, right? Let's say I'm going to a large transporter today who is equivalent to a DHL in terms of business,
Yep.
right? But my product is evolved only equivalent to a small transporter. He's not going to entertain us, right? That's a normal cycle of sales. But through the network of an investor, when they introduce you to a person, he might know that, yeah, this is the stage, but your communication, the large transporters communication with us, or large industries time with us, can help us tremendously in understanding their pain points and being able to navigate towards aligning our solutions towards them, right? So we'll be in the same direction, but getting that perspective is going to need some time from them, and that's where the network of our investors really really help us.
And how about data gathering? The more clients you have, the more data you gather.
Yeah.
And what is the significance of gathering all this data, and kind of what other product enhancements does it allow you to give your clients and your partners the more data you have? Is there an optimization part of this as well?
Absolutely, there is quite. In fact, you've caught on to one of the challenge areas that you were asking for
Go
yourself,
ahead.
right? In fact, logistics is so humongous, right? There's so many people even employed in India and stuff. There's so much data that's offline shared with people but not digitized, right?
Right.
So it's an incredibly large industry which is deficit of good quality data, right? So today, if you ask any in any industry or any manufacturer out there, etc., who's the best transporter for you, right? Or who's
Yeah.
the best transporter helping you transport your goods? It would be an intuitive answer rather than a data driven decision.
They have no idea.
This right, and this is one of the things that Rodo is currently already solving for. The reason that we're being able to solve for is because of the kind of work that we have done in gathering data, analyzing it, and helping the right stakeholders take decisions based on it.
So can you make a not generic, but like an unbiased analysis
Mhm.
between, let's say, like 3 local logistics providers based on what it costs, their timeliness, the effect of the cleanliness of their vehicle, like all these things? Can you gather all that data and then make an analysis and just say, hey, look, if you want to take it from point A to point F, this is the
Yep,
best provider, but if it's point A to point C, these people are better instead?
absolutely. That's the direction where we're heading towards. In fact, I'll tell you one thing, right?
Go ahead.
Sometimes transporter A, B, C, there are 3 transporters, right?
Yep.
All 3 might be good, but there's a lot of contextual information that gets missed out in the crowd,
Yeah,
right? I'll give you
exactly. Go
just
ahead.
contextual information. One is, you mentioned point A to point F. Transporter A might be good in that route. Point A to point B, another transporter might be better.
Right.
And as an industry, you might be chemical chemical goods manufacturing company,
Yep.
and another one might be FMCG. 2 different transporters would be good at it.
Right.
Understanding this trait is data driven.
Yeah, has to be.
That's what Rolo can, and he's already helping people do.
That's super interesting. What is the road system like in India? I'm really curious about this.
Uh-huh.
Not just the local roads, but like, the connector roads between city A and tier 2 city A
Mhm.
and its suburbs and exurbs. What are those highways like? What are those roads like? And does that impact what you do as well?
Sure. In fact, I've been very proud in saying this, that A lot of people outside of logistics don't really observe, but I tend to observe, and I really love the Indian roads. And in the past 8-10 years that I've been closely, obviously observing, and I've been doing my own road trips and stuff, it's incredibly improved. We have something called as national highways, and I think we have the second largest network of national highways in the world. The quality, the length and breadth that it covers, and the capacity of vehicle that it can carry today has increased by far, in the past, a decade or so. So it's really helped logistics. For starters, a vehicle that was allowed maximum capacity to carry, let's say, 10 tons, can carry up to 12 tons or 13 tons, like 20-30% increment. So what that means is better asset utilization, better return on capital invested for both the industry as well as the transporter who owns the truck.
Yeah.
So these are all positive impact in logistics, in reducing the cost of logistics in India.
And I'm wondering, if you look at your own company's growth, you look at the development and the digitalization of logistics, shipping, the connectivity between the drivers, the automobiles, the goods, and also the cities in which they operate. Are there other services you can offer them based on all the data that you gather and all the things you understand, particularly from a financial services standpoint, whether it's leasing trucks or funding them, or, do you know what I mean? Like other things you could do, even insurance for either goods sold or vehicle damage, stuff like that.
Absolutely. All these are, things that definitely can be part of the offering that Rodo has, right? This is a cash-strapped industry, right? A lot of cash transactions happen over here, and
Okay.
cash flow is like one of the biggest challenge that most of your service providers in logistics would quote,
Right.
right? And solving for that, there are a few services, let's say about freight bill discounting, or insurance on freight, or working capital loans, and all of these are byproducts of what data driven decision making and profiling of your key stakeholders can do. And that's what data that Rodo will also be very instrumental in enabling these stakeholders, I believe, in coming times. And that's where enabling these stakeholders becomes much more powerful for Indian economy itself, especially as far as logistics is concerned.
Got it. And what does growth look like to you? Like, what's going to drive growth really? Is it purely just going out and selling this product now, or is it development as well? Like, what is driving it?
I think there's an increasing understanding, especially after the COVID lockdowns
Yeah.
and so on. And there are a lot of external factors in terms of government itself digitizing quite a lot of processes, right? That there's introduction of something called as GST, and then e-way bill and e-invoicing, and all of these, which becomes a government compliance mandate. All these are doing one important element that's called an external trigger for our key stakeholders to digitize their own business. This is acting as a very important initiator or trigger for people to want digital solution, want to digitize this platform. And that's how we are able to foresee quite a lot of growth for us. And growth drivers are these stimuli that exist in the market.
Yeah, and for people that use Roto, do they get like a dashboard? I don't have a better word for it. So like if they're running multiple logistics vehicles, they can see where they are all at the same time, and they can measure their own efficiency internally and then do a better job themselves of just managing their own assets, as opposed to each individual route being optimized as well. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. In fact, we've to just put things in perspective, right? We've enabled more than 1 million logistics shipments, right, trips on our platform so far. The value that we add beyond just being able to get better visibility, improve efficiencies, and so on, is there are something called some penalties and some challenges that these guys have, right? So today, on a weekly basis, we help people save more than 1,000 crores in potential penalty. And such things really help automate and bring that kind of a value to their business in a real money terms. Beyond this, of course, the kind of solutions that we have launched help people get more business, from the ecosystem that we have developed within the network that we've been able to help them introduce them to.
Got it. Okay. That is a great way to end. Murugan, Manoj, Kumar, the founder and CEO at Rodo. Thank you so much for doing that today.
Thanks a lot, Michael. It was fun talking to you.